Lots to talk about when it comes to climate change. So let's bring in Rishikesh Ram Bhandary to speak more about this. He is the Assistant Director of Global Economic Governance Initiative at Boston University's Global Development Policy Center. That's a mouthful. Thanks for joining us on this program. So much to cover. I kind of want to get right to it. But one thing critics of green energy or climate deniers seem to latch onto is how much alternative energy will cost. I think one could argue just the opposite. Look at the fires, the hurricanes, the freakishly powerful storms, and encroaching oceans. Is there a way to gauge how much climate change has cost the global economy already? And if we do nothing, then what?
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, I think we have to understand that renewable energy already is very cost competitive. Just over this past decade, the cost of solar power, for example, has fallen by more than 85%. So we are looking at a very, very different economic picture when it comes to the cost competitiveness of renewable energy versus more fossil fuel intensive options. Now, in terms of the actual costs, of course, precise estimates will vary depending on whose modeling efforts we're looking at. But what most of these efforts fully agree on is that taking action now is far more economically sound than delaying action, because deferring and delaying action is going to be far costlier than however much it would take to start acting as fast as possible.
There are also issues that many global bodies do agree on. What are the key ones as you see them, and how are we faring as a global society trying to reduce climate emissions?
So practically every single country has signed on to the Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, when countries signed this agreement, we were a very long way from where the Paris Agreement really wants us to be, which is between 1.5 to 2 degrees of warming. Now, because of successive rounds of pledges that countries have made, we are far closer to these temperature targets than where we were 5-7 years ago. But of course, we still have many ways to go. But what I think we should remember is that there is a global consensus in terms of the direction that we need to be moving in. The question really is, how do we translate that into very clear, concrete steps so that we really make sure that we are on track?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right when you talk about being a global consensus, but clearly we have not hit the marks that have been spelled out in the Paris Accord. But are governments seeking to fund climate action, because many have touted their efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the number of countries that have come forward with what are called net zero pledges, right? That is achieving on balance zero emissions. And there's a very wide agreement. Countries like China have stepped up. So have India on a slightly longer time scale. But there is this wide consensus. But this is for, or these are targets at a much later time frame. What we need is more immediate action, more concrete steps, so that we actually will be on track to hit those targets that countries have set for themselves a few decades later.
You talked about that immediate action, and I can't help thinking about the massive setback for 4 years under former President Donald Trump. First taking the U.S. out of the Paris Accord, then saying the U.S. was required to, quote, pay too much. What did those 4 years cost the United States? And are wealthier nations really pulling their weight?
So the biggest impact of the United States not being in the Paris Agreement during the Trump administration was really that, the United States has been a major rallying force when there is political leadership. The Obama administration played a very large role in helping to put that global consensus together. And so precisely at a time when we need all of the major emitters to be on the same page, to move as fast as possible, having the Trump administration in power did slow that down. Now, of course, because this is a very big country and because only governments are not the actors relevant for climate change, there has been very interesting progress that's taken place, whether it's through the private sector or in other parts of the world. And so I think we have to recognize that this is really a whole of society approach that we need, and fortunately, many states and cities have stepped up as well. In terms of commitments of developed countries in supporting climate action in the developing world, The commitment of $100 billion to provide finance of $100 billion. Thus far, it has not been met. Now, developing countries have been saying that they need the financial headroom to be able to take on ambitious action. And so this is one area that needs attention because after all, 100 billion alone is not going to cut it. There needs to be a far bigger, larger scale transformation of the entire financial and development system to really make sure that both climate change and development gains are locked in.
Indeed, and the U.S. is only 6 weeks away from hurricane season, so hopefully we'll speak with you again about this. The issue is not going away. Our thanks to Rishikesh Ram Bhandary, Assistant Director, Global Economic Governance Initiative at Boston University's Global Development Policy Center. Thank you.
Thank you.